It is my ultimate pleasure to introduce a very, very good friend of mine.
Cool.
This woman really doesn't need an introduction. She's a rock star. She has her own show on PBS, a Peabody Award winner, MacArthur Genius. I don't know how many other things she's just been everywhere. And so without further ado, I'd like to introduce Miss Majora Carter.
Hi, honey.
Hi, boo. Majora, welcome again.
Thank you. Thank you.
Majora was a keynote last year as well, and was so powerful, so thoughtful, so generous that we were like, we have to have her back again this year because she's that dope. So you grew up in the Bronx.
I did.
You went to Bronx Science.
I did.
Yes. You went from Bronx Science to Wesleyan, which Connecticut's the same place as the Bronx, right?
Oh, yeah, practically.
Practically the same place. Came back to the Bronx, found yourself head of an organization at a very early age.
Oh, yes, very early.
How old were you?
I was practically like 14 or something.
You were like 14?
Yeah.
You were like 9, right? And on a walk with your dog, found yourself in a very interesting area in your neighborhood. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, when I came back home, the South Bronx, as in the South Bronx, it was an area.
Did you know KRS-One?
Did I know him personally?
Yeah.
No,
Okay.
I would really like to.
Okay.
But no, I've never met him. And so it was a place I didn't want to be at, poster child for urban blight. And I came back home only because I had to be there. I was in graduate school and needed a cheap place to stay, which was my parents' house. But I got very involved in what the city was trying to do to our community, which was basically create huge waste facilities on our waterfront. We already had a bunch, but this was going to add more. And so I got involved in that fight to be a part of the change there, but the walk with my dog really changed everything because I got to see that we had a waterfront. There was a little bit of seed funding that was associated with that got me involved in transforming that dump into a park, and it really set the stage for the kind of work that I did, which linked the development of green and sustainable development within the community to job creation in our community as well, because we have more than a 25% unemployment rate, high poverty rate, and the kind of hopelessness that comes only from poverty. And what I'm doing now is trying to do the same thing that I did with green infrastructure and linking it to low-income communities with technology.
So, Majora, you brought up a really good point. Earlier today, there was some discussions about what spaces Black women can occupy. And I think you're the perfect example of we can occupy every space.
Yeah.
Any space that we want to be in, we can occupy and we can own. And so can you talk just a little bit about what it was like to be in a space which started environment and now tech, in which there aren't very many Black women? What are the opportunities you see for yourself in that space, and how can we as Black women occupy these spaces and own these spaces?
Right. Well, first of all, it was incredibly wonderful to know that there are women like you out there, seriously, and women like you all who, because it did inspire me, because when I moved into the green world, I absolutely did feel kind of like a chocolate chip in a bag of rice. And I can't say it's all that different in tech, to tell you the truth, but the examples that y'all set has been really incredible to me. But what's also really important is that we can be in any place we decide to claim. But first it means just getting in it, looking for that little niche, the area to provide a way to support a need that needs to be filled, and then work like hell to make sure that it happens and build the kind of alliances to help you do that.
I think one of the things that people may not know about you is that you don't ask for permission to do things. And so in creating Startup Box South Bronx, most people wouldn't think of the South Bronx as being a hub of tech.
No.
Or tech opportunities or tech talent. And so how were you able to create that without asking for permission?
Because there was a need. My community needed it. And for those of you who don't know, Startup Box South Bronx is a technology education and entrepreneurship program, and our goal is to reduce the perceived, the perception of people in our community, our relationship to technology. Because right now we think of ourselves mostly as consumers of it, but in fact, we could become the producers of it. And so through training, seminars for both young adults as well as older ones, we want to create the opportunity to provide that kind of access. And but the bottom line is for us, it was job creation. We looked at the economic trends that were happening in New York City and realized if we were not careful about getting our folks ready to participate in that tech economy, once again, it was those tech booms and all the other booms, economic booms that happened, was going to pass by our community. So for us, it wasn't at all about, oh, this is a cute thing to do. This was like, look, if this train is going to leave the station, and if we can figure out how do we get people involved, or pretend that we're just going to sit up here and that someone's going to come to save us, because we know good and daggone well no one's coming to save us.
Yeah. And so I think one of the things that came up during what you were just saying is this question of vulnerability. And, as Black women, as women, as people, we sometimes have problems being vulnerable, or the perception of being vulnerable. And for someone like you, who is very front and center, how were you able to get over that? Did you, or I shouldn't even assume you had a challenge with it. But maybe I'm like, I had a challenge with it.
Or
but like maybe
assume that I got over it.
Oh.
Because I haven't. I really haven't. I just fake it, which frankly sometimes we have to do.
Yeah.
Because
Are there any tools that you use to fake it?
Oh, I pray a lot. I breathe, even when I don't feel like I can. I pretend that I go to my husband and I'll start yelling at the person that I really hate, and pretend that that's my husband, that my husband's that person, so I don't do it in front of that person.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. But really, much of it is just like knowing deep down inside that what I'm trying to do is the right thing to do,
Yeah.
and that it is a matter of just putting myself out there and not being afraid being afraid to ask and doing it anyway.
We had a discussion earlier today with Stacey Brown Philpott of TaskRabbit, and she was talking about heart and head, and making the marriage between those two and making the decisions. With you, how do you make your decisions? Is it heart and head, and something else?
The first is almost always the heart, almost always, and then I have to go, oh gosh, sometimes that's really not to be trusted, and start thinking about it. And I do have a really amazing support system that, so that I have folks I can bounce stuff off, and I've become much better over the years at identifying who really needs to be in my kitchen cabinet versus who needs to be in the garbage.
Right.
And that's been an extraordinarily hard thing to do, but I'm grateful it's starting to happen.
You talk about putting people in the garbage, not in a bad, I don't want to make it seem like Majora is she's an incredibly generous person. She does not just automatically throw people in the garbage.
Not automatically.
But,
they've got to earn that.
You have to earn the garbage,
Yeah.
right? But I think that's a great point that you bring up, because a lot of us, it's hard to move out people who may not necessarily need to be in our space. And so can you talk a little bit more about how you do that? What type of tools do you do to move people out into a space other than your own? We won't say the garbage, but into a different space.
I know that was kind of harsh, but
It's true, though.
I've had an interesting
And we keep it
couple days.
100, so
yeah, this is true.
Right?
It really is about staying focused on the goal. For example, my goal is to create opportunities for technology in poor communities of color and poor communities in general. But right now I'm focusing on places like the South Bronx because I think that there's tremendous opportunity there, and I want to see that happen. And so I had to get to the point where if it wasn't about helping to support that mission, then I just didn't have time. I mean, I've got a limited amount of time to do things, and people are depending on me to do them. So I have to, so in that regard, it is absolutely not about me at all. And I have to be about the business of getting something done. And if something becomes a drain and takes me away from that, then I just can't afford to have it in my life because it means that I'm not paying attention to what really needs to happen.
And you've been really successful at getting people who have no idea about the South Bronx, they couldn't even place it on a map, and getting them involved in this community that may seem so very foreign to their own community. How were you able to do that? Like, how are you able to communicate the needs of your community and be an advocate for your community to people who have no idea about the South Bronx?
Or even worse, that the no idea I actually kind of appreciate, but when they have an idea that is just based on, some truth, because we are a very poor community, but there is some crime. There's all sorts of things associated with it. But when they build it up into something that's just not even human, that's when it's a problem.
What do you mean by that, not even?
The way that many folks see people of color, in particular poor ones. It's not really human. There's something wrong. They need to be either taken care of or locked up, and they just don't know what's good. And that, because I'm one of those people. So it's like,
Say what?
Yeah, I was like, well, I don't quite get that. It's like, oh yeah, I went to the good school, so it's a little different for me. But basically, I'm like, no. I am a girl from the hood, and please don't ever forget it. And so my passion to ensure that folks see the humanity and dignity of people. And sometimes it is by embracing my inner capitalist and recognizing that in other folks and helping them make sure that they are adding to that, as opposed to setting themselves up, as just another social service cause that needs to be taken care of. So, and that's another reason why I love the sort of very dispersible nature of technology. Like, there isn't a reason why, within the sort of, big range of things that the products that can be built, the processes, the jobs that can be done, that they can't be done in other parts, of New York City above 34th Street. And so, like, we're even setting up projects with companies now to ensure that our folks are the ones doing this work.
And the work is development?
Our work, my company's work is, we're moving into real estate development now. So our goal is to how do you create, through housing as well, but in particular economic developments, to ensure that there's more economic diversity in poor communities. And that's a really exciting thing, and that's where tech plays a big role. But right now, one of our advisory boards on Startup Box South Bronx is the head of games development at Nickelodeon. And we identified that quality assurance for games development, almost all of it for all game developers happens overseas. And the idea of actually bringing QA here and training people to do that kind of project, which is actually a very interesting and good entry-level job into the world of game development and software development, that's something that we can do here. So instead of companies thinking about, software development companies thinking about doing CSR in the traditional way, it's like, oh, let's go to a poor community of color and help them plant a tree, which is just like,
trees are cute,
but
money's
but
good.
better, thank you very
money's
much.
better.
And so how about Startup Box South Bronx become the subcontractor for QA development, and then we will recruit the people that you need to get to work, and then you bring some of that stuff over here, and you're in the same time zone, and the work could get done here. And these are pretty decent jobs for folks, early entry-level jobs, and we did the first pilot with Nickelodeon just this summer, and it was amazing. Because they were like, we don't even know if we could do this here. We've never done it in this country. And I was like, well, we'll find you some folks. A couple of them were, kids right out of high school. The others were, folks that had taken some kind of computer science classes in college. But that was it. And our goal was to make sure that for the amount of work that was put into training them, that they produced more than Nickelodeon could even know what they could do with. And they were just like, this is really good. So this is about, we're helping them through supporting their core business model. Because it's not about helping us plant a tree. That's not how you're going to help people in communities like ours. It's about how can people in communities like ours be a part of their bottom line, so that the people in our communities are also benefiting as well. And we just looked at that one particular piece in QA, and I'm sure there's going to be others that we're going to be able to find for people who aren't necessarily going to be the ones starting businesses, but still want a decent job that can pay between $40,000 $50,000 a year. And there's a lot of folks like that. Or even if they start there, is there someplace else that they could go? Because it was so exciting to get one young woman, and the only young woman who came to the pilot program, who was just like, I only did this because I kind of need the money, but I'm really interested in development now. Like, it never occurred to her.
Never thought we could get paid for playing games.
Yeah.
That we
and
do
that,
anyway.
And that there's something else after that. She's just
Yeah.
like, you know what? There's like a bunch of things I could do with this. I'm like, yeah. And it was just like the most beautiful thing to see that. And I know that, so that's what, just opening the door for people to understand that there's something out for them to participate in, to get the fear factor out of the way, to show them that we're setting up opportunities for them to be able to succeed.
Yeah. And you're giving a path to that. I think
Yeah.
that that's one of the great things about you, is that you're actually bringing these companies to the communities, and they're actually showing up. That's one of the things that we talk about in Digital Undivided, is we need people to show up in our communities.
Yes.
We don't need you to give us free stuff. That's
No.
great. Planting trees is cute.
Very.
All of that. We need you to show up and give us jobs.
Yes.
And see the talent that we have here.
Yep.
See the opportunities. So I want to open it up to the floor, because I know you guys have a lot of questions for Majora. Or maybe you don't. Does anyone have a question? Like, oh, someone back there. Sorry.
Hello? It's not? Oh, good. Hi, Majora. My name's Christina Halpern. I'm the executive director of All Star Code. It's a prep program connecting young black men to the tech industry. I'd just love to hear more about Startup Box and just what kinds of events or things you guys are doing right now, and and hear more about it. Sounds fantastic.
Yeah, we're really focusing on developing this relationship first with Nickelodeon to subcontract to be their QA, their domestic QA provider in the States, and starting in the South Bronx, and finding other companies to do that, because frankly, look, it is not easy running a social enterprise. I'm sure everyone in this room knows, and the level of funding, even though I was been on 3 different top 10 or top 100 like people to watch in tech, things last year, I was able to raise all of $5,000, from one particular company who's in this, or a foundation that's in this room to support our work. And I was really grateful for that, but it was just like, it was crazy. So that's why we're looking for the earned income models to support the softer stuff, the actual trainings that we're going to do, because we've bootstrapped everything from going into local high schools and teaching young people how to code, to actually starting the first Bronx Tech meetup and being able to support that on our own, because we do have a community of tech folks in the Bronx, but we were the ones who pulled that together, and again, we've bootstrapped everything.
Do you think that that's a problem?
What?
Like,
Which one?
for just women-owned, I don't want to say minority-owned because we're not the minorities, but women-owned organizations that are owned by people of color, that we often have to overly prove ourselves, and by the time we prove ourselves, then we don't need the help anymore?
Well, I would never not take the help.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, it's, my experience in the philanthropic world, when I ran probably one of the most innovative nonprofits, this oxymoron, this grassroots, group that had an international profile, it was really difficult for me to raise money. I mean, and even though I set the stage for a lot of folks to follow, I watched, other organizations, mostly led by men, raise money, what's that phrase? Outfund me, yeah, really quickly. And it was very, very frustrating, but yeah, that's why I'm trying to look at a completely different way, of bringing funds to our organization.
Revenue speaks.
That's what I'm talking about.
What else? Why don't?
Hi, Felicia Grace, Morgan Stanley. My question is, have you found the government to be a help or hindrance in your efforts to create these jobs?
To be honest, we really haven't looked at this point. We're starting to get some interest now, in particular from the city government. But I wanted to wait specifically until we had the private sector involved, because then I figured, oh, they might pay attention a little bit more that way.
And they won't get shut down, right?
As easily.
As easily.
Hello, my name is Nina, and again, I'm the founder of the Student Dream.
How are
Hey, good. And my question to you, Majora, is, because I'm just thinking about my past and when my brother first told me when I went to college to look into computer science and engineering, and I was like, I don't understand the context behind that, I'm just gonna do business. How do you go into these schools, specifically with the students, and kind of rebrand coding, programming, technology to them in a way that's interesting and they want to be a part of it?
Honestly, the game development was a real easy way to get some young folks involved. And when we went to high schools, the girls, as much as boys, were all into it. And it was just like, okay, we're going to teach you how to build one. And it was about 50-50. You know, a little bit more boys than girls involved in the after-school program, but that was it. And we think it's a really neat little entry level or way to get people interested in it and keep them interested in it, and hopefully show them that there's a lot more out there. Hi.
Hi, Khadijah Britton again. We actually know each other from my previous organization, which is currently up and running up north, Better Bio, and you were a huge inspiration to me with the green work, but now I'm moving into Lady Bits, Women in Technology, so we're on a very similar journey. I'm just following you, Majora. But I wanted to ask you a question that may be difficult to answer, but I'm hearing in the tone of your voice, which is, having had the year you've had since we last saw you, with the New York Times coming down on you and a lot of community challenges and a lot of people thinking that there's a really thick line between private sector and nonprofit work, that being a very strong belief in a lot of the communities where you and I and many of the women in this room work, how has that informed Startup Box and your work now? Because you sound a lot stronger and more driven and more focused than like anyone I've heard in a long time. I'm like, damn, I'm like, watch out. So I'm wondering if this adversity maybe, you know, I mean, I'm just wondering what impact it's had and lessons learned that we all can take home.
Yeah, well, I'm going to push back a teeny little bit because I think there's a big difference between the people in the community, many of the communities that we either are from or represent or work in, support, all that good stuff, and those that are the dedicated part of the social justice industrial complex.
Can you say that again? No, and it's really interesting. It's a discussion that I've even had with people of the industry that has been developed. There's an industry that's actually now developed around getting, and I'm going to keep it 100 with y'all, Black folks into STEM. There's a whole industry, a whole economy that's actually been developed around that. So I think, thank you for bringing it up, Khadijah, because I think that's a really point that we have to talk about.
It's true, and you know, and honestly, having my face above the fold on the front page of the New York Times, put there by the social justice industrial complex, who got really threatened, I think, by, and just didn't really understand the fact that, like, you do have to work with business, you do have to work with government. You know, if we're going to create the kind of change that we need to create in the communities that we say we're interested in, then we can't do it the same way. It's like, I'm sorry, listen, I was just in Birmingham my first time last week. Is right on the heels of the commemoration of the 50th anniversary of the Birmingham bombing, the 16th Street Baptist Church, where the 4 little girls were killed. And it was, you have no idea how emotional it was to sort of go down that street and see that building, and then think about the conversation that I had before, where in some Black communities in Birmingham, more than 50% of the Blacks in those areas are unemployed or in jail. This is the crucible of the civil rights movement, and this is what's going on in our communities. So when I start hearing things about how, we just have to stay in our lane and do things the way the folks that, kind of haven't moved us out of where we are. I'm like, well, show me something I should listen to, and then I will. Because at this point, I'm about getting stuff done. I want to support people because, folks in this room, we are going to be just fine. We are. Let's just, can we just admit that? Thank you. And, but those in our communities, they are struggling. And if we need to be using our best gifts, and we have them, to figure out how do we support those folks and make it so that they don't have to be comfortable in the poverty that seems so normal for our communities right now. And I think tech is a way to do that. And I'm really excited about how we can connect it in ways that we weren't doing it before, and help our own communities actually benefit in every way possible. That is my job.
So we are out of time. Yes. We are out of time. Thank you, Majora.
My pleasure.
Thank you for being you. Thank you for being you. And we so appreciate you.
I appreciate
You're the
you.
perfect ending for our first day. Just love you. Majora makes hats too. I just have to
Yes.
bring that up.
Yes, I
Total
do.
random fact, but she makes hats as well. But thank you so much, Majora,
Thank you.
and it's always a pleasure.
Right back at you.
Thank you.